What's up guys, and welcome to one of the most highly anticipated smartphone battery tests of the entire year. We've got the iPhone 8 Plus, the Oneplus 5, the Galaxy Note 8, and the brand new Huawei Mate 10 Pro, which is going to be a very exciting one to test because we've got a gigantic 4000 mAh battery in there. And we're going to start things off with something that's pretty day to day. We've got Instagram loaded up, and we're on the home page, and we're going to keep refreshing that every 5 minutes for the next 20. Worth noting for each smartphone that they've got Wi-Fi on, Bluetooth on, and we've set them all to as close to the same brightness as we possibly could. Something that completely took me aback was that after the first reading, the iPhone 8 Plus has the highest level of battery remaining. Now typically speaking, when it comes to these battery tests, the iPhones have never fared too well, but with the new A11 chip in the iPhone 8 Plus, Apple did quite heavily focus on improving efficiency when it comes to lower level tasks like this. We're now going to move on to something a little bit more intensive. We've got the Antutu benchmark, which is going to test not only the efficiency of the displays, but also the CPU and GPU inside. Also, taking a look at the display resolutions, you'll notice they are all running in either a Full HD or a Full HD Plus setting. The Note 8 does actually have an option to go much higher to a Quad HD Plus panel, but to be honest, for the most part, I don't find myself using it, and this test is going to be fairer at the same resolutions. Now, one thing worth bearing in mind when it comes to the Mate 10 is that the software is in its very early stages. So whilst this is somewhat of a retail software release, it's not like a pre-release software, it is still going to be a little bit shaky when it comes to optimization. And the same is true for the Kirin 970 inside of it. It's a brand new chip and hasn't really had much time for them to continue to update it. And immediately we can start to see this becoming a bit of a problem, because quite surprisingly given its on-paper specifications, the Mate 10 has shot to last place. And oddly enough, the iPhone 8 Plus is hanging in there. It's doing better than I was expecting, only slightly second to the Oneplus 5. So we've now loaded up Temple Run 2, which is a fairly demanding game, and also kinda convenient just because it continues to run without constantly needing to press the screen. A bit of a trend is starting to emerge. You can probably tell the Oneplus 5 is cementing its lead, whereas the iPhone 8 Plus is losing its. We can see the Note 8 and the Mate 10 are starting to catch up with the iPhone, which is closer to the result we were expecting. As for why the Mate 10 is flagging, there are a number of possible explanations. It could very well be that the EMUI software on top of Android on the Mate 10 is just a little bit less polished. It could be that the Kirin 970, the chipset inside, is a bit less efficient. It could be the display, or to be honest, the most likely explanation is just going to be the immaturity of the software. Or it could very well be a combination of all of them. In order to continue to simulate someone's day-to-day life, we're going to open up the camera apps on all of the phones, just to see how much that's going to drain. In fact, all of these phones support 4K video recording at least 30 frames per second, which is kind of like the minimum standard for a flagship in 2017. So to really continue to push the batteries, let's try and record some. The iPhone has been hit by far the hardest, losing 10% in a very small space of time. It has now been overtaken by the Galaxy Note 8, and the Mate 10 is only 1% behind. Now we're going to switch it up. We're moving over to the Geekbench 4 benchmarking suite, specifically the CPU test. It's always interesting to see that in every single battery test I've ever done, the Oneplus 5 has always pulled ahead, which I guess is just a good example of how it's not all about the specification sheet. Before we change it up and do something a bit different, we're going to jump back into a little bit more Antutu. And it is good to see that as we're nearing the 2-hour mark on that timer, that all of these phones have got well over 50% battery. So whilst yes, compared to each other, we are going to have winners and losers here, it's good to see that none of these phones has a poor battery life. Now we're flicking over to YouTube streaming. We're going to get a 1080p video pulled up on all the smartphones, and we're going to play it for a length of time. And this is not going to be too taxing on the CPU or GPU, but what it is going to do is help to isolate display efficiency. And while we're at it, the videos are a pretty good way of highlighting the display quality differences. Whilst the OLED display on the Mate 10, the AMOLED on the Oneplus 5 and the Galaxy Note 8 are really vivid and have this crisp level of contrast, the iPhone 8 Plus just has this slight yellowish hue, which doesn't look as sharp. After the first 15 minutes, the iPhone lost the most in terms of battery, which is in complete contrast if you remember to Instagram at the beginning, where the iPhone lost by far the least. But whether you're on Instagram or whether you're watching a YouTube video, the main source of battery drain here is going to be the display. So it's quite an unusual result, and almost makes me suspicious that Apple has rigged its battery indicator, which wouldn't be unheard of. Some manufacturers have been known in the past to make the battery level supposedly fall quite slowly for the first few levels of percentage, and that gives consumers an initial level of confidence when they charge the phone. Having run Sonic Dash for a fair period of time, we've just hit the 20% low battery mode on the iPhone 8 Plus, and now you can see the Mate 10 has pulled well ahead of that phone. We're now moving on to one final session of Temple Run 2. Now, it is kind of concerning that the Mate 10 is in second last place here in what looks like the point beyond recovery. This comes even though, looking at the spec sheet, the phone should have won by a half mile. It has got a 4000 mAh battery, whereas the Oneplus 5 and Note 8 only have 3300. One potential saving grace here is that the Galaxy Note 8 over time since its initial release has actually become more efficient, and the same could be expected from the Mate 10. But even if we gained a 10% efficiency bonus from software, or even a 20% one which is almost unheard of, it still wouldn't beat the OnePlus 5, which is just puzzling. As we power through another few rounds of Geekbench 4, these phones start to move onto their last legs. We've got the iPhone 8 Plus on the very left at just 4% left, and the Huawei Mate 10 not too far behind at 10. The OnePlus 5 is leading the pack, and it looks like the Galaxy Note 8 is pretty comfortable in second place. And it doesn't take much longer at 4 hours and 31 minutes for the iPhone to finally call it a day. Even this is not a bad performance. The iPhone 8 Plus's battery life has actually got quite significantly better even since when I tested it on its release day. Opening up the cameras again on the smartphone, it's not long at 4 hours and 43 that the Huawei Mate 10 bottles it too. Now, to finish off the remaining Galaxy Note 8 and OnePlus 5, we pull up one final round of Antutu benchmark, which to be honest is pretty crushing in terms of battery life just because it's pushing the display, the CPU, the GPU and the RAM all the way to their limit. And of course, as we expected, at 4 hours 55, the Galaxy Note 8 has gone too. Alright guys, just before we get on to the final results, you probably know we are trying really hard to hit 1 million subscribers by the end of 2017. So if you could support me by subscribing, it would be really appreciated. Alright, these are the final results. In fourth place we have the iPhone 8 Plus with a time of 4 hours 31, which yes is last place, but I have to say even given that it's fairly commendable. We then have the Huawei Mate 10, not too long after at 4 hours and 43, which wasn't as good as I was expecting, but that also kind of is expected because of the software immaturity. The Galaxy Note followed a few minutes after at 4 hours and 55, but continuing this test with Antutu benchmark, and the OnePlus 5 was the clear winner, running out at 5 hours and 34 minutes. That's crazy. Anyway guys, I really hope you enjoyed the video, thanks a lot for watching, I'm Stu Who's the Boss, and I'm signing out.